Good afternoon. My name's McLaughlin. I'm the digital lead at HACT, which stands for Housing Association Charitable Trust. One of the many things we do as a charity is work with the social housing sector, which we've done for the last 62 years. As my job title suggests, I lead on our digital work stream. Much of that is about really how social housing can better use technology to get better outcomes, both internally and for tenants. So today we're talking to Luke Mccreery from Curo, and we're going to kind of unpick some of that and how that's currently working, particularly in respect to Curo's new damp, disrepair and mould strategy. So just give Luke an opportunity to introduce himself, and then we'll just have a kind of chat about some of the kind of key barriers and challenges in this area. All right?
Yeah, so my name's Luke Mccreery, so I'm Director of Planned and Commercial Works here at Curo. One of the things we've started doing over the last 18 months is working with Vericon and their remote monitoring. And yeah, we've seen huge success, which I guess we'll go into over the next hour.
Excellent. So as I mentioned in the opening there, I suppose damp, disrepair and mould is probably one of the key areas. I mean, for me, what we see just now is people looking at, probably struggling to prioritise between building safety, that kind of lettable standards, and some of the sustainability piece. And for me, they're all kind of interlinked, and I think that's probably led to some of your use of technology. So it'd just be good to understand what was the driver towards your new strategy, and the kind of history behind that.
Yeah, to be honest, our initial conversation with Vericon didn't really identify damp and mould as the principal purpose of the pilot we're going through, if you like, with Internet of Things, of which Vericon are part of. It was really around the smart monitoring of heating appliances to start on the route that a lot of housing associations are towards proactive maintenance rather than constantly being reactive, which we know causes obviously customers to have to take time off work, etc., and go without a service provision for a certain amount of time. What is then soon transpired into is the amount of information we were getting when putting in new heating systems with the Vericon systems, including their multi-dots, is that what it was then clearly identifying was issues within the fabric of the building, which the heating being solved in itself wasn't going to be the permanent solution, or in some cases adding actual extra heat when maybe potentially ventilation was a problem. It could actually exaggerate the issue within that home. So what we then soon moved towards in conjunction with the proactive maintenance. So I think we're still getting the benefits of the proactive maintenance element. We have seen a huge increase in the data that we can gather from properties, homes, which then help us identify damp and mould issues and start the process of moving away from, in my opinion, the sort of the norm that it's the customer behaviour, it's their fault, the way they're living in the home. By us getting true and active data on the way that property is performing and the interaction with the customer who's in there is giving us the ability then to make decisions in terms of remedial works based on true data, not just sticking a damp probe in a wall and having a 5-minute conversation with the customer, to try and get the long-term and sustainable solution to potential damp and mould condensation. And obviously with the current climate, obviously the disrepair element as well.
It's interesting. I suppose if you were to listen to media, you would think this is a damp and mould is probably the biggest issue that social housing organisations face. Is that something that you guys had highlighted in your stock was a kind of key issue originally? Obviously, I realise that that's not necessarily why you were looking at the kind of pilot project, but is it something you previously highlighted being a kind of key issue?
Yeah, I think we've got an ageing housing stock, like a lot of social housing providers have. So, yeah, damp and mould has always been something that's on our agenda to try and fix, but without having the true information on data performance and being able to get that customer insight, it was something that, like a lot of housing associations, we found ourselves on the circle of find it being reported or being identified by either a colleague or reported by a customer. We would go and have the initial survey. We would do remedial work but then it would come back the following winter or a few years later, and we'd be back on that cycle, which we understand as a business. Ultimately, that offers very poor customer service, and also to our asset. Obviously, it means that the asset may not obviously live out its designated lifespan. So it's something we've been aware of, like all social housing. Obviously, there is a media spotlight on there, which is absolutely understandable. And some of the things being reported in the national outlets are clearly unacceptable. And us as a sector need to obviously find a long-term solution to eradicate these problems.
Definitely. And as for me, like anything else, technology obviously is going to play a huge part in that. Is that something that across other areas of your business you try and employ tech solutions, or is it something you're kind of finding your feet with this pilot?
I think it varies between sort of different departments and different solutions they're trying to solve. But I think us, again, like a lot of the housing associations, are very much on that route to sort of Internet of Things and automation. I think for us, making sure that whoever sort of whatever our long-term strategy is sustainable, and also is the best option for both for us from a business point of view, but also improves the customer element. So I think like a lot of people, we're sort of just starting to dip our toe in and trial different things to try and get that balance between cost and affordability, but with the extra information to ultimately improve customers' homes.
Excellent. And I think it's something we can talk about as we go through, but I think that a couple of things you spoke there about, and almost about the data that you can collect and the insights you get from that. And I think for me, that's one of the key elements of the use of tech in social housing just now. So I think everything we seem to do, be that a kind of sustainability agenda, building safety, damp mould, digital inclusion, knowing more about your customers. We're collecting more and more data now. The ability we have to do that manually is fairly restricted in terms of manpower and resources. And if we're going to be able to do that long term, when we think about aging stock, it's a perfect example of that. How many times are we going to have to go out and survey buildings to find this out? Just the amount of visits that would require. So for me, that not only does it make it efficient, but you're collecting more and more data. And unless we do that with kind of good interlinked tech provisions, we're not going to use that data because it's going to go on PDFs or spreadsheets and no one's going to use it. But I think the ability we have to better understand how these kind of data sets can be used within an organization, have that integrated software, I think it's probably really key, to be honest.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's absolutely critical that as we get more information on our customers and our properties, is ensuring that we have a central point where the data can be stored and accessible to whoever is going to be interacting with that customer or property to make those decisions better and much more long lasting. So I think, like a lot of sectors, housing associations are no different. That we've been collecting data for years and years, but as you said, it's on individual emails, and what you're probably finding is individuals are going out and having very information. Comes back to a central point of the data available to then make the best decisions. I'm not a believer data doesn't necessarily drive you to the right answer, but it gives you the information required to then put the human element into it to then hopefully get to the more long and lasting sustainable solution.
No, I agree. It's interesting. I was thinking that kind of dichotomy there, the fabric first approach to buildings. So you need to almost, we're working with an aging stock. We need to ensure that those buildings are better fit for purpose for modern living before we start thinking about new heating approaches or the kind of sustainability agenda. I suppose the same works for data-driven insights. So yes, we want data to underpin where we're going, but actually without those kind of more traditional methods that social housing have been great at is understanding stories about tenants, about what they like, what they don't like, and what works. So actually, I think we often say data-led decision making, and I think that's fine. But I think what has to be added to that is the human element, and some of the stuff, particularly around fuel poverty, and I know that some of the insights you probably gained from the pilot, support some of those outcomes. You have to understand that it's not just data and numbers; it's about real people, and I totally agree.
I think that's where it's important. Is sometimes too little or too much data can cause you to go down the wrong path. So I think what we're trying to do here at Curo is get better data so we can better understand our property and our customers and how the two interact together. But what we're not looking to do is remove the human element of it. We still want the data to be overviewed and processed by people, our current colleagues, who can then in turn interact with customers and put the data element, overlap that with the customer element, the empathy, the understanding to the current solution, to then find a solution that works both for us and the property, but also them and how they interact with their property. Are very much our stance is homes for good, but that includes both the fabric of the building, the customer, and how they interact to each other. And I think data obviously plays a key part in that, but I don't think as a sector, in the sector we work with customers who need our support, I don't think we can step away from the human element, and that wouldn't be something that we are trying to do exactly the opposite. We're trying to interlink both rather than one replace the other.
Excellent. Now, it'd be quite interesting just to hear a bit more about how you mentioned before about the pilot, and you'd focused on one thing and it transformed into a kind of wider project. So there's probably two things that I'm quite keen to know. One, how did that all come about? And two, how do you usually procure tech in that kind of a solution? As I say, it sounds like it's quite a foundational step, but is that a similar way you would kind of procure any suppliers or any project? So it'd be quite good to understand both those things. Yeah.
So first of all, we look to bring Vericon in to install on a percentage, and it is only a very small percentage. I'm not trying to say we've got thousands of them by any means. But what we viewed is we could start putting in technology on some of our new installations, which we do as through our DLO, so it is an internal resource, to start trying to get more information on the boiler and proactive maintenance of it, to ultimately improve the service offer we can offer to customers. That all comes down onto the Vericon portal that at the time only my team from a planned works division had access to. When we were then looking at some of the data and dew points and humidity that we can get through Vericon, on a couple of occasions, we realised there was something else going on in the property that wasn't affecting their heating and hot water, but was obviously the way it was transacting with the customer and the property was going to cause either identified already issues or was going to cause issues if not looked into. So we got in contact with our asset management team, which is another in-house service, and that's where the specialists, our surveyors, sit. So we started sharing that information with their qualifications and competency. They could obviously translate that data into actual solutions and ways they could use that to, on some cases, prevent something from happening in the future, or use that data to find a solution to a damp and mold case already active. So then we soon transitioned within about 6 to 8 weeks into a process where the Vericon dashboard is open both to my team to monitor the appliance side, but also asset management and their property surveyors. So they've got access to it. So if they obviously periodically check it, if they then find obviously any of the data which isn't quite where they'd want it to be, if that be dew point, humidity, temperatures, etc., they can then arrange a visit with that customer, get the data, have the conversation. That's where the human element bit comes in, understand with the customer what their lifestyle is, etc. Continue to monitor that data and then find the solution, do whatever remedial work based off of the conversation and the data, continue to then track that property for another period of time to ensure that the levels have come down or whatever they were trying to achieve has been successful. So yeah, that's how it sort of transitioned from a very much let's try and monitor gas boilers so we can tell if it's going to break down before it breaks down, to a much wider strategy, including sort of damp and mold and fuel poverty.
Excellent. So initially at the start of the project, how do you, for example, the Vericon, how do you hear about Vericon? Is that something that you guys were already aware of, those kind of solutions? And is it something that social housing are beginning to do more and more, do you think? I think I've lost you there, Luke.
Sorry.
Hi, Luke. Sorry, we lost you there very briefly. I think I was just asking about when you get a new project like the one you got, Vericon. How do you highlight that Vericon are the supplier you want to work with, for example?
So we've worked with a few over the years and will continue to. So we have an internal procurement team who put the tenders out, and then obviously various companies, if they see or they fit, will have the opportunity to tender for the works.
So what I think quite interesting from our point of view, we work with a lot of social housing organisations, and often it's price and efficiencies that drive that. It's just to get an understanding of, making a business case for a new project list. Do you take into consideration some of that more human and person centred approach we spoke about earlier on? What we think is good technology is technology that also supports better outcomes for our tenants rather than just purely internal business efficiencies, which I do require as a kind of legal entity, we do require to consider as well.
Yeah, I think depending on what we're trying to procure, and certainly in this instance, because it was to do, ultimately this was a pilot, a project to improve the service offer to customers. Obviously price, as you rightly said, obviously comes into it, but this was really about making sure it was a product that we can use the data, going on what we spoke about before, but was right for what we need, which is ultimately to improve sort of the performance, if you like, of customers' homes in terms of damp and mold and heat and EPC and energy efficiency and all sorts. So yeah, certainly on projects like this, the human element plays a key factor into it. Maybe if it's a housing management system, obviously potentially that could be different because it's not seen by the customers, but as this one, the customers. And when we look for our long-term solution over the coming financial years, again, obviously the customer element and our customer scrutiny panels will feed into all of those decisions.
Brilliant. In terms of the outcomes of that pilot, have you had enough kind of insight from that to know, has it made a difference with how you're handling damp and mould, and has there reduced or improved the claims?
Yeah, I think from a damp and mold point of view, I think what the pilot has been successful in proving that getting data from how the house is performing and interacting with the customer is critical to getting those remedial works right. Before, we'd send very competent and professional surveyors, but all they'd have is obviously the equipment and then a conversation with the customer. But it's sometimes very difficult to really understand over any sort of period of time exactly how that property is performing. So what the pilot has clearly been successful in is that to tackle damp and mold long term and find those long term solutions, we need data from those properties, exactly how they're performing. So yeah, on that case, it has been a success.
In terms of that data, so you get, I assume, loads of data from that. How often do you view it, and do Vericon support that process of you having that kind of 24-hour access? And I suppose interesting to see, what do you use most in it?
Yeah, so Vericon have been great with us. I think obviously it's fair to say Vericon are new to the market, certainly within social housing. So there's a constant conversation with them about, can we get this information? Can we get this in a different format? We've also recommended a couple of things that they could potentially, in their R&D side, actually have a look at implementing. From the information we've got, we've suggested a couple of things that if they could look to bring out would further enhance, in my opinion, the offer of the product that they're bringing to the market, and something that obviously I can't say too much because we've spoke to Vericon about it, but yeah, a few things that we think, now we've used it for sort of 6 months or so, if it could do a few extra things, it would probably fill another hole in the market which currently isn't being sort of serviceable, if you like, to social housing maintenance divisions, and us having our internal division. So all of our responsive repair work is done in-house. So it means that that information flow for us is far simpler.
Excellent. In terms of obviously the data you receive, does that enable you to look at not just a snapshot, but start analysing some trends? Like, can you see some of the things about not just the property, about how tenants are using the property?
I think you could. We don't use it for that. We very much get the telematrix around sort of damp and mould in dew points, etc. And we then get notifications of when the boiler has actually failed, so we can start on that. Or they've got some sort of data sets in there. So if there's, say, pump speeds start to run slow, it will send us like sort of an amber warning to say there's no issue with the heat and hot water, but obviously the boiler is starting to show signs of a failure, which will give us, we haven't got to that point because we're installing them predominantly on new installs. So
sure,
with our, we would like to think that the boilers aren't going to fail within 6 months, but we've seen through the conversations we've had with them, in them sort of talking us through the system, how long term, when those boilers maybe become 3, 4, 5 years old, we'll start being able to use that to get to a point where we can start offering proactive appointments rather than the customer actually having to deal with a service failure before we then obviously attend as an emergency.
That's really interesting. I suppose it gives it starts to think about the type of decisions that having that data enables. Have you got any kind of examples or types of examples of things that, you know, through the data you're collecting this, it's enabled you to make specific decisions about how you do things or how you support tenants?
Certainly on the fuel poverty side. So there's been a couple where we get constant codes through which say the boiler has failed to ignite due to no gas. So we're able to have a conversation over the phone to check that, say they've got gas on the meter, those sort of conversations. What then that is transpired into is a potential fuel poverty issue. So we've been able to use it again, only obviously this is a small sample size, but on a couple of occasions we've managed to get our sort of customer support team involved in that customer, and then have found a much longer term solution to their sort of financial issues. So it has started identifying, and that's really off of, you can see sort of the low temperatures in the property. So even over the boiler, it hasn't got any gas going to it, or the heating is very used very sporadically. So it has started those conversations, and we've had a couple of instances where that is then proved, I wouldn't want to say life-changing because that's up to the customer to determine, but certainly the additional support that we've then been able to give to that customer undoubtedly has made a difference to them and their well-being.
You know, that sounds really, really encouraging. I think it's interesting. So in terms of the kind of sample size, and do you think this is something you'll roll out further? And I suppose the interesting thought for me is, and will you then develop your strategy around technology like this, and roll that out across further stock?
Yeah, I think long term we have a strategy to put more technology into our homes to better understand sort of customers and how they're interacting with the property. So from next year, we do have a strategy to increase our investment in this field. And I think as obviously us as a housing association, but also as an industry, obviously as we mature in this field in terms of how we get the data and what we can use it for the positive things for our customers, I think this certainly for us, and we absolutely get that other housing associations are further along on this journey, but we also understand that some housing associations haven't even started to consider it. So I think one of the joys I've always found about working in social housing is ultimately we're all in this together. We're all ultimately trying to provide the best service and the best quality homes to our customers. So that in that side of it, there is no competition element. So what we'll be looking to do is join sort of groups of other housing associations to start understanding maybe some of the ones who are further along this journey how it started for them and how that process is now transitioning maybe into active asset management and customer welfare and better understanding of how ultimately we can support customers to live a happy and successful life whilst they're customers of Curo.
Excellent. In terms of, we've mentioned a few times about efficiencies and it's, learning new ways of working. Have you been able to highlight areas of cost savings through using this process?
Yeah, so what we've managed, so through the going back to the initial reason of bringing in Vericon, which gives you the automatic, we've so far, and again the sample size is small, we've saved about 45 engineer visits by being able to fix over the phone. If that's a simple top up of a boiler, no heating, no hot water, or sort of user error or user concerns in terms of time clocks and room stats. So that simply translates to us is that's 45 visits that we've had to save sending an engineer to that property, and then all the on cost and ultimately those 45 jobs we haven't had to attend, those engineers have been able to attend other breakdowns quicker, services and other things. So yeah, there's efficiency gains that we've already seen, and obviously off our sample size it's shown that if we were to roll it out, the gains would be significant for us to be able to do things that we either currently can't do or we would like to do but can't do due to, say, budget constraints.
Sure, that's brilliant. And I suppose the other bit of that is the kind of buzzword at the moment, and in terms of kind of decarbonisation. So you've then got less people on the road, less journeys, and managing that all from a central location, where that can, I suppose, not just better manage efficiency around it, but I'm assuming in terms of your workload across your maintenance teams, you're able to predict things a bit better and manage how that works through having that.
That's certainly the long-term view. What I would imagine is you would still have technical teams having oversight of the data, but I think if we rolled this out to say a couple of thousand properties, what I'd imagine this tool would become, we have a central contact center. What I'd imagine is this tool will become part of their day-to-day journey, and then the technical element will stay with the technical teams. Ultimately, what we know is from when we do emergencies and out of hours on weekends, etc., that a lot of customers are more than happy to try simple fixes themselves, obviously within line with legislation and what they're comfortable with, because ultimately it gets whatever service provision they have lost back quicker. And obviously saves the frustration of having to take time off work, stay in evenings, etc. So I think that what we will start using this towards is trying to fix over the phone where we can and where we are comfortable and the customer is comfortable. But again, what this won't do is change our service offer. We will still employ direct trades operatives and we've still got all of our priorities depending on the breakdown or the how severe the issue is, depends on how quick the turnaround. So for those customers who either don't feel comfortable or aren't able to try sort of fixes over the phone, then we still have a trade staff division who will be able to attend within our customer commitment.
Well, look, that's been great. Thank you very much for giving so much insight and really giving an understanding of the pilot programme. Is there anything else you've not covered that you would like to mention or to say about what you found about that, or what it's led you to think about future uses of technology or Vericon?
No, I think just for me, I think and we've touched on it. I would highlight the thing: the more data we can get, I think there's three sort of critical masses to this. I think the more data we can get as a housing association and as an industry and as a sector is critical, as long as you've got a data source where that can all sit and then can actually be maintained, and don't remove the human element that a lot of what we do and a lot of what we will still know, which there isn't any data for, is that human interaction, understanding the empathy and the emotion of certain situations. So we're looking to ultimately go down the line where we can offer a better customer service through increased data, but still with very much the human element of being somebody there, be able to talk to, touch, feel, etc., which obviously data will help on the journey, but we're not looking to it as the only solution. We're looking at it as part of our long-term approach.
Excellent. Well, look, thank you very much. Have a lovely rest of your day, and hopefully catch up with you soon.